One of the things I got really excited because of this first verse that we're going to share tonight. It's fantastic. There is a place in the gospel where Sri Ramakrishna talks about bhakti jnana as a path. So the path of love or devotion and the path of knowledge. He puts a dash between them and talks about bhakti jnana for a while. And so I've been really attached to that idea in the last 6 or 8 months and trying to put it together. And this verse is really one of the few, I think I've only found one other in Christianity that gives a Buddhist teaching, gives a Jnana teaching. And I'm very excited about it because it ties it together so beautifully. So we'll jump in. And if any of you are ever interested in an academic read on Jnana or Advaita Vedanta and Christian theology, I have a book on it. It's it's an extremely academic book. I mean, I managed to read it, but not without a huge amount of effort. It was so dry to read, and he gets into all these minute little, Christian father references and things as he puts it together. But he's a Benedictine. I think he's a Benedictine. Might have been which order of the Catholic Church is it? That's the scholars. Is it the Dominicans or
I think
something?
it's the Jesuits.
The
Is it?
Jesuit. Okay, might be a Jesuit writer. Anyway, he writes this book, and it's a big treatise on how Advaita or non-dualism is in fact a Christian is an acceptable Christian interpretation of Christian scripture. So it's exciting to kind of see that work because boy, does that really show what Ramakrishna was saying is true. All jackals howl alike. That really the religion is one, almost obviously so. If you take any time to dig in and find out what's in there. And so this very first verse, are we ready? Should we jump in? Shall we start? I'm going to
Where are we?
quickly.
The name of the book?
We're in the Philokalia. We're on
Oh no,
page.
the book, the one
Oh,
you were
let me
just
show.
talking
Yeah,
about. Is this?
yeah. Let me grab it for you and show you. I think it's right here on my shelf. Just a second. Yep, here it is.
Oh wow. Well, could be more forthright than that.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's not a thick book. You can see but it's a real. I mean, uh, it's 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 not an easy read. It's very technical and very particular and completely devoid of any bhakti or any devotion whatsoever.
Okay.
But
Are you pinned?
yeah,
Sorry.
it is available. I know I did because I actually recommended it to Swami Harinamananda, and it is available on Amazon if you are interested in that kind of reading, that kind
Cool.
of study. So, all right, now,
Sorry, Swami. I just want to make sure you're pinned. I know you've been kind of busy, so I wasn't sure
was sure about what?
if you're pinned, like for.
Oh yes, I did. I did. I pinned it on purpose. I don't normally do it, but I've been told several times that when you go and watch a recording, that it's kind of it's disturbing to some people that they can't find out who's speaking if they don't know who's speaking. And so I guess anyway, so I remembered this time and now I'm being chastised for it.
Which page on Philokalia are you?
It's 393. I hate to look so distracted, but I'm looking around for my glasses and I'm not seeing them anywhere. So,
Velma.
oh no. All right, we're gonna pretend I don't need them. As you can see, I'm not fully convinced that I don't need them. I'm like, where are they? Okay. Anyway, they must be at Greg's house, maybe. Who knows? Another mark of my deep responsibility. All right. So jumping into the Philokalia, this first verse, wonderful verse. Get ready. Here we go. Repulse thoughts. That means, don't have any. Repulse thoughts and do not allow them to run through the heart and settle there. All right. What does that mean? That means don't let the heart attach to any of the thoughts that are going through the mind. In Christian speak, this is the way they would say that. It's like, to any thought that arises in the mind, don't let it connect to the heart. Don't identify with it. Don't attach to it. He says, do not allow them to run through the heart and settle there. Passionate thoughts settling in the heart revive passions and kill the mind. Right? The pure mind is what he's talking about. The mind that Ramakrishna would say is Brahman, is God. That pure mind and God are one. And so these passionate thoughts are thoughts that have in fact connected with the heart and have awakened within you a sense of identity, a sense of desire or attachment to them. And that in doing that, they kill the mind because they wake up the mind to all of the other related thoughts that will rush in at the attachment. If you attach to a particular thought, within seconds, it will have a whole cadre of companions that have risen around it to create a state of mind. That's where lust comes from. That's how anger develops. That's how jealousy grows. All of these things, they start with a small rising of a mind. Usually what happens, to describe the process, is that some current sensation will come in through your taste, touch, hearing, or smell, and it will bring up a memory from the past, because all thoughts arise out of the past. It'll bring up a thought from the past, and then that thought arises, you attach to it, you like it, or you think it describes you, or you think it's your personality or your thought. Anyway, you attach me and mine to it somehow. That's what attachment is. And as soon as that happens, that thought takes some of your sentience. You now become dual. You now become two people, because you become the watcher of that thought and the listener of the accompanying thoughts. So you become two. That's how the duality happens, is through that attachment. And then it grows. It puts you into a state of mind, which is a state of delusion, which means now your interpretation of reality is not what is in the moment, but what your mind is telling you about what is in the moment. And so you're whisked away on a story. That's ego. That's what it is to be in ego mind, is to be in that situation. So he says, passionate thoughts settling in the heart revive passions and kill the mind. Therefore, as soon as they come near, from the first moment of their appearance, see how he's really talking just like the Buddhists were talking in Zen Buddhism this morning. As soon as that thought arises, as soon as it comes out of nothingness, immediately let it go. Do not identify it. Do not think about it. Don't analyze it. Don't judge it. Don't anything it. If you keep yourself completely separate, just as the observer, with no interest, that thought will dissolve as easily as it back into nothingness, as easily as it arose out of nothingness. That is the state of the death of the ego. Without attachment to a thought, if you're able to watch them and let them rise and let them fall, that's transcendence of ego. That's transcendence actually in general, because you're transcending the world, because the world exists in thought only, and you're transcending your attachments and your ego identity. So it's almost impossible to live in that state for a normal person. Thakur says. He says that as soon as you manage to control that ego, one's gonna spark out of somewhere just unknowingly. And so that's why he tells us to train ourselves in our ego state when we have a sense of I. If we can't maintain that state, at least take that sense of I and put it in the service of the divine, which means that as you watch your thoughts, right, you hold within yourself the presence, the awareness of the presence of the divine, the awareness of awareness. You hold that in that space and you sit in that space, and all those thoughts are coming now before you, and consciously your chosen ideal, the divine. And then you, as a servant of the divine, act accordingly, you know. And so he says, for us, for the normal person, for the average person, that we're not able, or it's very difficult. It's not that we're not able, although if Thakur says it's not likely, it's probably not likely for us to maintain that state. You know, we can have moments of that state, of that understanding, which it's really neither of those, neither a state nor an understanding. But it's a space that's very pure. And if you can hold it, hold it. If you can't, then offer it to the divine and sit there in the company of the beloved. So he says, therefore, as soon as these thoughts come near, from the moment of their appearance in the mind, hasten to strike them down by the arrow of prayer. And that's exactly what we're talking about. The arrow of the prayer is that communion with the divine, right? So that awareness of the presence will prevent the thoughts from becoming too sticky for you, because you are sitting in service to the divine. If you see mother, father as and you being the servant, or mother and father and you serving mother, father, you know, then whatever relationship you have with your chosen ideal is all right. But bring that to the forefront. That's what protects you from a deeper attachment, from getting literally tied up in your thinking, in your thoughts, so that you're not able to escape your lust or your anger or your jealousy or whatever the state of mind is that's being implicated at the moment.
So, Maharaj, sorry, can
Yes.
I interrupt? I'm trying to understand in practicality. So two kinds of states arise, right? One is that you are just not aware, and the thought just comes up, and you bring yourself back to as the witness, or as the awareness that is watching the thought. But once you are there, then it doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't stick. There's another thought arises. So here they're trying to say is to offer it to the ideal. I'm not understanding how. Is it that you hold the image within your heart and stay there, or is it that once you've gotten into the thought, then you offer it? I mean, if you can just clarify that a little bit.
Well, yes, okay. So what's happening is that the ideal is to sit there as the uninterested witness and just watch it come and go. That's awareness. Right. Now, most of us are in a state of distraction, which means we're already at least one or two thoughts into the mind, right? We've already attached to a thought or two. It's holding our sense of I. And so if we're already in that state and we aren't in that space of just simply being able to uninterestedly watch the thought. If we do have our identity running and we are watching the thought, we do think they're our thoughts, then yes, however it is that you've established the presence of the divine within you, that's the one you use. If you are taking an image of mother and thinking of mother and having her, you know, the traditional Vedantic practice of seeing her seated in the shrine of the heart, facing the same direction you're facing. If that's your practice, then you would do something like that. If you're more of a kind of a God without form, you know, where it's not really a physical thing to have the presence of God, but that it's the feeling of bliss or the feeling of companionship or love, then you can use that. It's any thought of God, really, any held thought of the divine. And that automatically protects you to a certain extent, because it draws you from the worldliness. You know, it gives you a space of safety, of refuge, really. So you take refuge in Mother, you take refuge in the divine. And he's just about to tell us what to do if that doesn't quite work, if these thoughts continue to pursue us, which I think every one of us has a very intimate experience of being pursued by thoughts that just won't stop. They just nag at you. Thakur says that lust is one of those. And he says, unfortunately, that the hankering after that pleasure doesn't dissipate until realization, which is one of the things on my list to really yell at the Lord about when I see her. It's like, how fair is that? That even you have all that determination that it's just going to sit there, it's a spiritual mosquito. So he says here, though, as soon as they come near, from the first moment of their appearance in the mind, hasten to strike them down by the arrow of prayer. If they persist, pushing at the door of attention and troubling thought, know that they are reinforced by a hidden desire for them, which has preceded this attack. So he's saying, become aware of the fact that you are not letting go of them. It's not so much that they're persisting, it's that you are interested in them. And so he's now saying what we as Vedantins would say, it's time to discern. It's time to go inside and say, why are these not dying? Why are these thoughts not leaving me? There's an interest there on my part. And why am I interested? Why am I interested? And what am I interested in? And you start taking it apart. You start so that you can let go of them, because we get convinced that we want these things. Any of them. It can be anger, it can be lust, it can be any of those things. You get convinced that you want the thing, and you're not really honest with yourself. You are with one hand holding on to the thought, and with the other hand you're battling it, right? It's not really it's not a sincere place to be. But sometimes we're not aware of that dual mind in us. We think that we're all right. We think that we're earnest and that we're being sincere, because we haven't quieted enough to go one more notch closer to our silent self. That's one of the advantages, not the advantage, but the beauty of this space that we have within this unchanging absolute, is that if we can manage by any grace or means possible, when you're sitting actually in that space, the thoughts come from ground, from zero, so you can see, if you're watching your own self and watching mind and watching the thought, as you're just watching basically in every way, all of your senses are tuned to that sensitivity. Then you see that you want it. You see that as clearly as you see the thought. You feel that inside, that whatever it is that we have that goes, ooh, candy, and reaches out to take it. If you aren't seeing that, if you think the thought arose and you're trying to get rid of it, but it's not going away and it seems to have a power of its own, and you're convinced that you're, quote, being tempted, like that, then you can know that you're holding on to it with one hand and fighting it with the other. And for a minute, just stop the battle, just pause it, and just breathe for a second, and then just be honest with yourself and look very clearly at it and say, okay, gosh, I really want this, don't I? Seemingly. And then ask your mind, with the presence of mother, keep the ideal, or mother, father, who however you identify with God, keep your chosen ideal present, because that's what keeps your objectivity active. That's what keeps you close to the source, keeps you close to that truth, is that the having your image of the divine within you, because Thakur says very clearly that the name and the form are not separated. If you say the name of God, God is present there. And so it's that inner awareness of that presence that guides our ship, keeps us going steadily, keeps us from lying to ourselves, or keeps us from learning that we're lying, or helps us learn that we are lying to ourselves and to become aware of that lie, which is very important, because if we're not aware that we're lying to ourselves and we think we're trying our best and we're just being tempted too hard for us to overcome, which is the common story, especially if you're raised as a Christian, that whole story is just is a story. It's a lie that we tell ourselves. It's how the ego has managed to shut down our discernment in order to keep us captive to it, keep us dedicated to our high idea of ourself as an ego self. So it's all very subtle. So what he's saying here is the first and best choice is, as soon as you see that thought arise, already let go of it. Just guard your hands. Make sure there's nothing that's attaching to it that wants it, and it will die of its own accord just as easily as it came in. If you're finding that thought is persisting, he's saying it's because you're attached to it. You want that thought, and it's time now for you to do some discernment. So you turn on, you bring in your awareness of the divine, and you sit there and you start the process of taking it apart. Either praying to Mother, show me, Mother, how, please show me, remove this burden from me. So he says, if they persist, pushing at the door of attention and troubling thought, know that they are reinforced by a hidden desire for them, which has preceded this attack. Okay, so the reason they're not going is because you have a desire for them. You want them, you like them, you're attached to them. So they trouble and importune the soul as though by right, because your will has wavered. In this case, it is necessary to pillory them by confusion, for evil thoughts immediately turn to flight as soon as they are exposed. All right? That sentence means the same thing we talked about Swami Prabhupada saying. The knots of Maya untie themselves in the light of awareness. So if you invite that awareness, which is your chosen ideal, if you invite Mother to come in and sit with you, that awareness and that communion with the divine thought, the divine presence, will show you a true light, will give you an objective perspective and make you aware of your desire. And so in that desire, then it's time for discernment. Sit there with Mother and take that thought apart. Identify them and be fearless about it. Don't worry about Mother seeing private things. Sit there with Mother who knows every private thing about you anyway, intimately. Sit there and go through it with her and see what you're holding on to, how you're lying to yourself. Now, most of us, when we're encountered the idea of lying with ourselves, will deny that. We'll think, nah, I don't do that. I'm a good person. I have a good heart, which is all true, but you're still lying to yourself. And Mother helps you to find that awareness. As darkness vanishes with the coming of light, so passionate thoughts disappear in the light of confession, in the light of honesty to Mother, with Mother. So in the light of the objectivity of that awareness of the divine within, you will be able to dismantle this delusion, and whether or not you're successful the first time will really depend on how earnest and sincere you are about it, unfortunately. And that's why we lie, because we don't like to be confronted with insincerity in ourselves. Realizing that one is a hypocrite is a very, very difficult thing to do, a very difficult thing to accept. I know, because I have done it 1,000 times in my life, caught myself in blatant hypocrisy, and it's one of the treacheries of being a monastic or being a religious person in any level, but really if you're in the clergy or if you're preaching or teaching, or you have to be especially careful, because to present yourself as one thing and to be another is an obvious problem for people doing what I'm doing, which is sitting here reading scriptures, trying to grow, trying to learn from it. And so be aware, it's a treacherous thing within ourselves, and that honesty is extremely important. I had a very difficult situation when I first joined the monastery, and I was so overcome by it. I ran to Swami and told him all about it. And he made me repeat it 3 times in detail to him, which was horribly embarrassing. And he told me, he said to me, he says, your honesty has saved you. Go to the shrine. And so that's what Thakur means when he says truth is the sadhana of this age. It's accepting yourself as you are and seeing clearly and being willing at that time to invite the divine into the presence, inviting yourself into the presence of the divine, really, but we do it by inviting God into our presence. That's a very important factor in order to be able to take care of these very subtle tendencies of us to long for things that are egoistic in their outcome and will cause pain, will cause suffering. It's one of the most fascinating things to me about Maya is that the camel eating thorns is such an appropriate description of the way we are with desire. That we will sit there and chew on thorns, our lips bleeding, our tongue getting poked, and we'll just keep on. Oh yeah, oh, this is what I want. No, this is what I like. And it's tearing your life up, whether it's an addiction to drugs, addiction to sex, addiction to attention, whatever it is. It's an emergency situation. And the cure for that emergency is this awareness, this light. You have to acknowledge your problem, and you have to bring Mother in there. You have to accept her grace. You have to accept her presence. You have to accept the surrender that is going to be required of you. And you have to make that decision clear inside. And so that's a very difficult thing to do. Maintaining that level of honesty with ourselves is hard. And it itself has an initial pain, but the aftertaste of it is always bliss, always a great joy. When you actually manage to navigate that successfully by grace, wow, there's a wonderful fulfillment inside, and Mother always touches you with a special warmth, in that situation. So passionate thoughts disappear in the light of confession, for they themselves are darkness. Yes, they are ignorance, and Mother is knowledge. Mother is light. She's Vidya. So she comes, or the divine comes, and casts out that darkness, reveals to you your lie, reveals to you your insincerity or your dishonesty with yourself, and provides you the motive through the presence of that divine bliss to surrender it, to let go, even though you might be clutching it quite tightly. For example, if vanity and the passion of lust have gained place in your thoughts, they are immediately banished by the shame of confessing them. Yeah. Once you see what's really happening, it's horrific. You're like, no, that's not who I am. That's not why I am living this life. I've decided to leave those things. And by the suffering caused by the penance imposed, after this, thoughts of all kinds find the mind free of passions and occupied with a ceaseless, contrite prayer, and so hasten away, covered with shame. Those things retreat. And really, not, of course, in the Christian ideal, their darkness gets ashamed in the light and mopes off, goes away defeated. And that's a fine way of thinking it. In Vedanta, it's really just that a thought that finds no interest in the observer will sink again into nothingness, will be powerless, because that's the nature of thoughts. They rise from nothing for their moment and they fall back into nothingness. And so if we allow that process, that's successful. We will become aware of the presence automatically. We will feel the divine bliss. If you've become a master, you'll be aware of the anahata sound, that divine song of God that always plays within you, and you'll experience your freedom. You'll enjoy the now. You'll enjoy your isness. If you don't, then it's a struggle, and to what degree it's a struggle depends on how deeply you're attached. If you're attached to where you don't successfully get rid of it and you become overcome by it, then there's a lot of pain in that, a lot of pain that manifests in many, many ways. One of the primary which, and the most dangerous of which, is lack of attention, lack of awareness, because you start having, in order to just be comfortable with yourself, you have to start pushing things out of your conscious mind because they're unpleasant. You know, we don't want to be hypocrites. we don't want to be angry, lusty, jealous, mean people, you know. And when we're in the spirit, as it were, when we're seeking, spiritual seekers, we're extra sensitive to that. And so if we're not careful, the ego will mimic that peace by hiding things from us and allowing us to be dishonest with how we really are and with what's really going on inside. If a man strives to cut off by prayer the thoughts that trouble him, and manage for a time to drive them away and to stop their frequent appearance, but cannot get completely free from them, and so remains in the state of one now vanquishing, now vanquished, this happens because he has a fondness for the causes of those troubling thoughts, bodily comfort and worldly ambitions, because of which he does not hasten to confess his thoughts. Right? So he's saying there that what we've been talking about the whole time, actually, that if you find yourself in a situation where you're just not overcoming your vices, you know, like Girish Ghosh, you know, if you continued to drink, it's like, and it just kept going on and kept going on and kept going on. It's because of that desire, because of that enjoyment that deep down inside. And, you know, and that causes us to that dishonesty. And so the confession he's talking about is a confession to the divine, a confession to yourself. Hey, I've got a problem here. You know, I need to work with this. And that's what they say with alcoholism, you know, that you can't do anything about it until you've hit that space inside where you're like, I can't go on like this. I have to get out of this, you know. And so he's mapping that out for us here. And does not hasten to confess his thoughts. That's the thing, you know, when as soon as you realize there's trouble in paradise, turn to the Lord immediately with an earnest prayer. And you'll be able to know, as a spiritual seeker, you'll know how serious you are about overcoming this passion by the quality of that prayer, by a couple of things. One is how quickly do you pray, and how fully do you pray. Those two things will teach you a lot about your sincerity and about your earnestness. You know, if the thought comes and you know it's there and you don't take it super seriously, you're like, oh, that won't be a problem, and you don't immediately sit down and begin your japam, or you don't immediately go to the shrine and prostrate before God, then you can see, oh, you're making a little bit of an allowance here. You know, you're not admitting that it's an allowance. You're calling it, oh, I'm not that interested, or it's not that bad. You're justifying it a little bit. You're letting it happen, you know, and it's just, you're letting it creep in slowly without you acknowledging that you're aware there's a problem coming. And you wait till it gets too big, right? Now, I hate to say all of this comes from my own experience of watching my mind. It's embarrassing as all get out to say that. But I want you to know this is very real. This is really how this thing works. And that if you don't muster that earnestness and that sincerity, as soon as you know there's trouble in paradise, as soon as you see an attachment, then the likeliness of you overcoming it isn't great at that moment. And you'll go into this state of being, he says, vanquisher, which means sometimes you'll be successful, and vanquished, sometimes you won't. And a lot of your life, you'll just be stuck in a place where this vice or this problem doesn't leave you, and you kind of get caught in a whirlpool off to the side. And that's not any horrible thing in the sense that it's horrible in and of itself. What's horrible is that you've got your realization just waiting for you ahead, and you're stuck in this little whirlpool, and it will take your eyes off of that imminent realization, and it will make you feel like you'll never get there. It'll make you feel like you're not powerful enough, you're not strong enough, I'm not pure enough, I'm not able to do this. And all those will be excuses of the ego, because it's not that you're not powerful enough. It's not that you're not able to do it. It's that you're not admitting to yourself that you don't want to do it. And you're not initiating the discernment that would help you learn the reality of what you're involved in. And you won't be able to break the lie that you believe that this is something you want. When in fact, if you measured the pain that it was causing you in your life, and if you were actually becoming aware of the damage that it does to you in your inner peace and your inner psyche, you would pitch it out as fast as you would a skunk from your kitchen, you know. And so these are subtle things, but this is the crux of our journey. This is really where the rubber meets the road, is at this level of our dedication to this life, to this casting out anything that isn't helpful immediately, without question. And so he has no peace. That's actually not the first thing that happens. The first thing that happens is fear. The presence of God becomes somewhat uncomfortable, right? And so we tend not to draw God in to that level of intimacy because it's uncomfortable, because we know we've got things going on that aren't helpful. And that fear then will manifest as a lack of inner peace. You're not able to rest in the self. You're not able to rest in the shrine, because your shame and your guilt will keep you bound, will keep you from entering that space. And so living a life without having that shrine available to us, unfortunately, most of the world, I don't know, it's very easy to become accustomed to living outside of that space where you just keep a frenetic flow of constant busyness, constant tasks that have to be done, watching movies and listening to music and all of these things that distract from that discomfort begin to rule our life. We need constant activity. We need constant distraction. And that's hard to go backwards from those things. I I learned when I was in 6th grade. I made the mistake of holding Denise's hand before. We'd only gone on like 2 dates, and I held her hand, and I felt so guilty riding my bike home. I was like, oh my gosh, I held her hand. I shouldn't have held her hand. We haven't been going out hardly long enough at all for that. And so we had a talk, and we decided that we would back up, that we wouldn't hold hands anymore. And that was my first lesson about how very difficult it is to back up. Once you've given yourself permission to cross a particular line, getting yourself to back up back behind that line, very difficult thing to do. So if you've got a situation going on inside where you've made lots of these compromises, it's difficult. It takes more energy and more awareness and more work to back up from that. And so, don't let it get to that. If you have gotten it to that, that's fine. Call on Mother's grace, but be diligent and earnest from right now forward in keeping that space out, because you don't have to drag the guilt of the past into your present. You don't have to do that. It's not helpful to do that. So if you realize that you've done these things, you realize that you've got a problem, don't define yourself as being a person who does bad things. I'm a bad person. Don't attach to that failure. You see, stay in the moment. In the moment, you're ever free and ever pure and ever blissful. And you start from this moment on. You can't do anything about that imagined past. There's nothing there to work with. It doesn't exist anymore. You've just got now. So accept the grace of the Mother, which allows you to hold on to your purity now. Now you're perfect. Now I'm pure. Now I'm fine. Now I'm not trapped. And then follow these instructions diligently. But you're going to have to be diligent, because with habit, your diligence will get challenged. So that's pretty much what he's saying there. And so he has no peace, since he keeps in himself what gives the enemies the right to attack him. If a man steals things that do not belong to him, how can he avoid being tortured for this by those to whom they do belong? And how can a man hope to be set free by his adversaries if, being tortured, he does not restore what he has wickedly appropriated? Right? So this is to help us undo that story of like, oh, it's not so bad. It's okay for me. Mother understands. Mother and I have a relationship. She gets me. Or however it is, where you just think that, well, I'm trying and I'm growing and I'm doing so many other things in my life. This isn't that important. That's all egoistic thinking. That's ego trying to maintain control, trying to make you dependent on the ego. And so you have to be careful about this. This is why they do that restitution thing, or that, when you confess, the priest gives you a certain number of Hail Marys or a certain number of whatever's, japam or whatever, to as penance. And penance, the interesting thing about penance is it's not for God. Penance is for you. It's for you to fill up that hole of guilt, that hole of shame. It gives you some pretense that you can do something about that past or about that habit and go forward. But you can do the same thing just by faith and grace. Just grab immediately to that grace and use that grace to invite yourself, as painful as it is, into the light, into that presence of the divine. And then start discerning and really start going through there and find that string of truth. That's that hum of truth that is within you, and pick it up and follow it. But when by effort a monk has become strengthened by memory of God, and so welcomes the degradation and vexation of the flesh and confesses his thoughts without fear of shame, the enemies immediately retreat, and thought, becoming free, keeps constant prayer and uninterrupted contemplation of divine things. Well, there's some real beautiful little pieces in there. So, but when by effort, okay, so you make that effort to discern and to stay aware and present, has become strengthened by memory of God. Oh, by memory of God. How would we talk about that? When you're quiet and you think of the divine for the first time, you feel a recentering, a recentering occurs to you, and you feel that little bit of that joy at the thought, or that joy at the remembrance that, oh, God is ever free. I'm ever pure. I'm ever beloved. You take that moment and you strengthen yourself in it. And it's interesting because he says, and so welcomes the degradation and vexation of the flesh, so that using the memory of God, these thoughts, when it's just like at that beginning, what we talked about, this thought arises. If you are already established in the memory of God, or in the presence of the divine, that thought will take its natural course and disappear. So it's welcomed by you. It's not feared by you. It's not resisted by you. There's no need for that resistance or that fear. That's not the problem. It's not because it's interesting, because if we're very accustomed to attachment, we actually think that these thoughts and these ideas have a power in them, that resides in them, that there's some sort of sentience there in this other mind that's trying to trick you and trying to weaken you, and it's going to nag you and nag you and nag you. That's how the ego sees it. The ego, which is already at a third-party state, which is already not in harmony with the witness, and certainly not in harmony with the divine, it sees it as a struggle, and it sees two living, sentient ideals fighting one another and trying to overcome one another. That's not what's going on at all. It's that you won't let go of the thought. Yours is the hand that holds the rope that binds you down, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. It's understanding that you are the one that's giving that thought power by your identity with it, by your attachment. That attachment gives power to that thought. You're refusing to let go of that thought, keeps it present, keeps it returning, coming back again and again. It's not that the thought wants to conquer you or wants you to do anything in particular. It's that you want to compromise and enjoy some pleasure or enjoy some ego at some level. And so by creating a battle, this is all very subtle thinking. And I hope that this is only unique to my mind in the years in the past. I hope you're not in that state, because it's a horrible state to be in, where you fight the battle, but you're really, even that is a delusion, because you're only fighting the battle long enough to feel like you've put out a good effort. And well, if I lost the battle after a good fight, at least it was a good fight. And so you don't feel so bad about it because, well, I really tried and gosh darn it, I almost did it, and so you kind of go on in that delusion. And the mind is tortuous with these little tricks of the ego to maintain its control, to maintain your own little universe free of any pesky have-tos or shoulds, And so he's really drawing it out here quite clearly for us. So if we strengthen ourselves by effort and establish ourselves in the memory or the thought of God or the practice of the presence, then we welcome this degradation and vexation of the flesh, because we see no threat from it. There's no concern. It will arise and it will fall with no problem whatsoever. And we confess our thoughts without fear of shame, because we didn't hold on to them. We didn't identify with them. When you identify with these wrong thoughts, you feel shame. Shame toward what? Shame toward your own self. You alienate your own self. You banish yourself to the changing mind, because the feeling of shame, the feeling of wrongdoing is just too much in here. It is the story of the Garden of Eden. You have looked through your senses. You've seen beauty. You've desired it. You've made it a part of you in an attempt to reach fulfillment or a happiness or a joy independent of the idea of the divine. And you are then you hear God in the cool of the night walking through the garden, and the number one thing, you run and hide, because you can't bear that shame. You can't bear that feeling of holding on to this wrong thing, this unhelpful thing. God comes to you, you feel that nakedness, you feel your absolute unworthiness, you feel that shame. God, the presence, fixes it, but he says, look, as long as you hold on to that, as long as you insist on that, you're going to have to work for it. Desire is never fulfilling. A desire never ends. It just keeps growing. And the more you feed it, the harder you're going to have to work, and the more particular it's going to become, and the longer you're going to have to look for things that fulfill it, and the more expensive they're going to be to get, and the more you're going to have to work to get them. And like the curse of the garden, for all the days of your life, you will scratch and till at the dust of the earth to fulfill your desire. So it's all of this warning is for your peace, for your success, for your enjoyment, in the true sense of enjoyment, not an enjoyment that you constantly have to work to maintain, but an enjoyment that comes from your very nature, that is full and rich and always present in you. But shame and fear from attachment prevents you from being able to access that very subtle peace that passes understanding deep within. So thoughts without fear of shame, the enemies immediately retreat. If there is no attachment, if there is the presence, if there is awareness, these thoughts, before they don't even become enemies, they come and retreat immediately, even before they've been damaging at all. Become free. So this monk who makes this effort, establishes himself thus, becoming free, keeps constant prayer and uninterrupted contemplation of divine things. We live in the presence of God. We live in that constant awareness, like Brother Lawrence. So this is the ways and means for this successful realization, coming to realization, establishing yourself as a seer, as a knower, as the witness, and understanding the nature of all worldly things, all thoughts, that they as things, they are as seen properly, they're the song of the love of God. They tell of the divine. but seen incorrectly, seen through ego, seen through self as body mind, they're enemies. And seen through attachment, they're conquering enemies, right? And so this is the reason for our practice, and this is our reason for our diligence and for our seriousness in our practice, so that we don't fall victim to this delusion, to this lie of the ego. So he gives us the last two of the chapter here, of the essay, last two teachings. Cut off drastically any suspicion that may arise in the heart against other people, for it destroys peace and love. But accept any calamity which may come from without with courage, for it gives an opportunity for profitable patience, a patience which will be rewarded in heaven by peace and joy. Right? That heaven for the Christians is something in the future. For the Vedantist, that heaven is within you in this state. If you can stay surrendered and confident in the grace of the divine and in the constant awareness and presence of the divine, that is heaven. It doesn't get any better than that. There's a beautiful, beautiful bliss in that, a comfort, and that peace that passes understanding. You'll realize that it's yours and that it's always been there. And that's what makes you kick yourself around the block, like, my God, how could I not have done this 40 years ago? How come I didn't let go of that thing 40 years ago? How come I held on to it for so long? Spending thus your days, you will pass the present life in a manner good for your soul, inspired by blessed hope. And when death comes, you will leave this life unafraid and will enter the abode of rest prepared for you by the Lord, to share in his kingdom as a reward for your present labors. To him be glory, to him be honor and worship. With this eternal Father and his all holy, righteous, and life-giving Spirit, now and forever, and through the ages of the ages. Amen. Beautiful. Just, I think that's been my favorite reading from the Philokalia so far. That is just stunning. What an accurate and helpful map that is for us to pay attention to. Oh, look, it's 7:57 even. So there it is, Advaita, right there within the Christian scripture, spoken in Christian terms, the practice of the presence, which is the exact same teaching from this morning in our Zen Buddhism class, which is the exact same teaching that you would get from Ramana Maharshi, or that you would get from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, or when Thakur is talking about jnana, the path of knowledge, he will talk about the exact same things. So you see, it's all one. It really is the same struggle within every practice, within every tradition. They're all dealing with the same thing. You've got to come out of the mind. Stop being told what you are. Stop being led to what you want to do. And find that self as you are in the moment, undefined by samskaras, undefined by the past habits and past experiences, not longing for any particular future to manifest a desire, but letting go completely of that desire, letting go completely of any need whatsoever, and resting in Satchit Ananda, which is enough for you, which will be beautiful for you, which will be divine, which is present in you always, not to be attained, but to be recognized, to be seen. You know. Anybody have a question? I'll try and be quiet for a second or two. Any?
So true. Everything, it's just so funny how things work, because everything that you just said, like when my husband just went home, when he left his body, we took the path of Vedanta, and everything was everything is true. And just here recently, the idea of separation kind of hit. And what the funny thing, what brought it was reading the Bible.
Mm.
And it's when Christ had stated what we had said all along, that in heaven there's no husband, there's no wife, there's no kids, there's no marriage, there's none of that. It's all God. And I see Vedanta in the scripture of the Bible blasted all over those pages. And
Yeah.
I've just been crying. I've been crying all week. I'm like, back into just to the heart to process those things. I'm like, wow. Like at first I was like, it's not my husband, and I looked at my kids and I was like, you're not my kids. You're all God. And we knew this already, but when it hits you back in the face like that, it's just the most beautiful, divine thing. It was just, I just had to say what you just ended right there with. It's just, man, it's just beautiful. And it is, heaven is right here.
That's
It's
right.
everywhere.
That's
It all
right.
belongs to God. And I just sat there and was like, as a householder, as a mother,
Yes.
as all these things, just to
Mm.
renounce it all again, just to be like, okay, I'll let you feel that pain of separation just a little while, but it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
not true, and it's not.
That's
It's
right. Yeah.
just beautiful.
It
I
is
just had to
beautiful
say it.
because the reason there's no children in heaven and no marriage in heaven is not because there's none of that. There's no need for that because the
No.
union is absolute. The unity is one. There's one without a second. So you and your husband, there is no separation of body and a mind between you. There's the hearts. The hearts
Mhm.
united as a singular, So all of these things come home, bring us into that beautiful, beautiful reality
Oh
of
yeah,
love binding everything together.
God will
Yeah.
God will pull you by your hair and your ears, let you feel it for a little while, and then throw it right back
Yeah.
on. It's just
Yeah.
never fails. Just it doesn't. Just like wow,
No, it
so
is.
great.
It's wonderful to hear that that brings a joy to you. I also feel that when I find these little verses like this, I get so giddy about it. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I can't believe it. How did I not know? How have I never seen? It is this really spiritual life is such a joy and such an unfolding of such a satisfying. You spend your life looking for something meaningful. You spend your life looking for something satisfying, something that fills you, and you join spiritual life. And in the beginning, Mother gives you a few little zings and a few little this and that's, and you think, oh, I found it. And then you sit for 10 years, wondering, where'd she go? Where is she? But she always comes back. She comes back as soon as you start letting go of the senses, as soon as you stop looking for her out there somewhere and you start sensing it here, then Mother, I can't speak for Mother, but it seems like Mother wakes at that point. She'll poke you again, give you a taste
She throws
out there.
pebbles in the lake of your mind. She's like
Mm.
sitting there, pluck,
Mhm.
pluck, you know.
Yeah, she'll clear it away for a second. She'll clear the greens, the green scum away for just a second, and you catch a glimpse of that clear water. You know it's there, and then it comes back again, and the work continues. But she definitely lets us know that this is real. She definitely gives you those touches every now and then that are so clear, that are more, the scriptures say it sometimes. Thakur says it's more real than real. It's there's such a clarity to it and such a depth of experience that it is undeniably more real than anything your senses can ever mimic or produce. And that's what drives that longing within us, because we realize we're living with these big fat gloves on called the senses. We can't really touch anything, we can't really feel anything. And we don't know that as long as we've just lived in the body mind. We don't realize any of that. And that's why life seems fine the way it is. And we get lulled into a sleep, into a whirlpool of just acceptance that that's the way life is. But then you get that taste. Oh boy, is it over? It's over for you. You get one of that taste from the mother, and you suddenly realize that it's like listening to people in a box. You can't. This world is so clunky when it comes to experience. It's so interpreted, so second nature, so removed. You're separate from everything. But in this divine world, within, there's no separation. There's nothing between you and love. There's nothing between you and God, and that vivid reality is yours forever. Forever. And you'll fall more and more in love at every moment, endlessly. God will never cease in his manifestation of beauty. Every time, every moment that you put your attention back on God, she is more beautiful. She is more loving. She is more gracious than she was even a moment ago. And, blessed Swami Brahmananda telling us, yes, once you've had that, even in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you've only just begun. That's the beginning of love, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That you will go on seeing more and more beauty and more love forever and ever.
Mm.
Yeah. That's the nature of this. All right. Wonderful.
Thank you, Maharaj. That was beautiful. Absolutely
Yes,
beautiful. Thank you
that
so
was
much.
divine. And so
It
next
was
week
divine.
we'll come back to the way of the pilgrim. All right. Okay, be
Thank you,
well.
Maharaj. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Jai Ma.